This video is an explanation of the reading passage about speech recognition. So this could be watched in conjunction with any question about the passage. The question itself would be explained in its own video explanation. If you're practicing multiple questions about this passage, I would suggest not watching this video until you're ready to review everything, because this video will talk about the passage itself. So let's move on to the passage. One reason we are able to recognize speech despite all the acoustic variations in the signal, and even in very difficult listening conditions, is that the speech situation contains a great deal of redundancy, more information than is strictly necessary to decode the message. So right away, that's interesting. That speech is full of information, and much of it is redundant information. Okay, there is firstly our general ability to make predictions about the nature of speech based on our previous linguistic experience, our knowledge of the speaker, subject matter, language, and so forth. So we can often predict what's going to be said in a certain situation. But in addition, the wide range of frequencies found in every signal present us with far more information than we need in order to recognize what is being said. As a result, we are able to focus our auditory attention on just the relevant distinguishing features of the signal, features that have come to be known as acoustic cues. So that's very interesting. These acoustic cues, they may be words, they may have something to do with the frequencies. In other words, we can discern a lot about what someone is saying even without the words. So this is very interesting. You could imagine, blah, 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 or blah, 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 without just blah, 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 with different inflections would convey different meanings. So this is very interesting. So far, this first paragraph is about this complex idea of acoustic cues and how speech contains much more information than what we conventionally think, just the words. Now let's move on to the second paragraph. What are these cues, and how can we prove their role in the perception of speech? So interesting, prove. So that right away suggests this is a controversial idea. Some researchers feel that there are these cues, but other researchers doubt them. And the researchers who feel that there are these acoustic cues want a way to prove them. So that's very interesting. So this is a real question about science. How do we prove that something exists? It is not possible to obtain this information simply by carrying out an acoustic analysis of natural speech. This would tell us what acoustic information is present, but not what features of the signal are actually used by listeners in order to identify the speech sounds. That's really interesting. So in other words, we could look at the acoustic signal. We could run all the numbers for all the sounds that are coming out of a person's mouth, and great, we could produce graphs and charts. We could get tons of information, but that would not tell us what is the other person actually hearing, and which parts of that, of all that information, which parts of that information is the other person picking out as meaningful. The best an acoustic description can do is to give us a rough idea as to what the cues might be, but to learn about listeners' perceptions, we need a different approach. And that's the end of the passage. Now, this is interesting. So right there, it's not solving the problem for us. In other words, we want to figure out whether these acoustic cues exist. They propose one solution, carrying out existing analysis, and it tells us clearly this alone is not going to work. Maybe it would be part of the solution, but it's not going to solve the problem all by itself. And so we're kind of left hanging. And so we might say that the overall point of this passage, it brings up this complicated problem, it proposes one solution, and then it tells us why that one solution is not going to work. So that's basically what's going on with this passage.